right is from Sèvres porcelain, and it's from the Huntington Library's collection. And it's something that is the backside of the porcelain. So that's something that I'm really interested in working with, is this idea of dismantling some of the power structure of what that porcelain began as. I did a residency fellowship at La Napoule. It's a chateau in the south of France. And I was really interested, and that's actually where this idea began. I was very interested in this idea of how some of the porcelain motifs or botanical motifs that are found in porcelain mimic or derive from nature in surrounding areas, and how that becomes stylized. So I started to make a kind of inventory, let's say, of some of these patterns. And really this kind of piecemeal is a way that I really make my work. I'm somebody that seams together ideas from various different points of view in order to make one vision. So here, that was a view of the gallery itself. And this is actually one of the earliest pieces in the show. And this piece is actually from the bridge that we've all been looking at, that connects San Pedro to Long Beach, that's been under construction, which I've been documenting for the last 2.5 years. And this piece was really about this idea of bedrock, or what our land is built on, and in a way, maybe the Native American source, and then how we move up, perhaps in this case, moving towards this renovation of a bridge. This is an image in the gallery of just a juxtaposition between two pieces. And to really show how I'm interested in this idea of permeable walls, or the idea of constructing something that's a weaving that is, again, derived from multiple sources, but in a sense becomes like a new collage that reveals and conceals different images as it's become woven together. So this piece also began in La Napoule and was derived from the nature surrounding the area. This piece is called Aperture, and it's involved with a lot of images which you can't necessarily see, that are from sunsets from all over the world. And the idea is really about our collective experience, and how this wall, which is in a way a wall of construction, and also, again, a permeable wall, is about this idea of global, or passing through from one place to another. This piece is called Nila, and it's actually from the images that were, or the patterns that are in this piece, are from the collection in Valencia at the Ceramics Museum. And I tried to trace this idea from Iran, some of the patterns that move from Iran through Europe and so on. Again, I'm interested in this idea of pattern in porcelain and how it moves lineage-wise, but also how it's used, or how it was used as forms of power, but then how that can be dismantled through ideas of burlap in this case. This piece is called From the Base, and it's actually meant, not the base as you might be thinking of it today, but the base of looking at the base of a pot from the underside and then having that span out or splay out. And again, the crest in this piece is what's moving around the circle, which is the bottom, which is just made of worn jeans. The stripes are meant to mimic Frank Stella, and again, kind of bringing together some of contemporary ideas with historic images. And this piece is interesting because there's actually 3 views that are going to come up of it. It's from an image that also was from Sèvres porcelain in the Huntington Library. And what was interesting there is that they also had the plants to go with the pieces. So I actually did a combination of studying the porcelain piece itself and also studying some of the grapes that corresponded to it. And that's what made this drawing. Or I say drawing, but it's also, I consider it to be a tapestry in a way. The drawing that you can see that we started with that's in the background there is the same piece. It's the back side of what this porcelain piece would be. So again, it's the grapes. And I loved the juxtaposition between Paul Scott's work and my own. This piece is one of the first of this group. And it also is from a piece that was at the Huntington. And what was interesting here is this idea of there's a center reserve in some of these porcelain pieces that is about like a picture of the landscape. In this case, it was an Asian image, which I also found like this sort of hybrid cross-cultural mashup is something that I've really interested in sort of pulling apart, and you can kind of see it here as well. And when I'm making these pieces, I'm really constructing them in a collage form as well. So how patterns move over and through some of the surfaces that I'm working with. And this piece is actually derived from a Meissen piece, and in Meissen, was one of the first factories in Germany. And they made these very sort of unsentimental floral pieces, and that's what this was derived from. I should also say that really the subject of my work has to do with translation. So it's translation from one medium to another, from one culture to another, and from something that's traveling from one place to another. So this was really all about the porcelain trade. And the other thing that's perhaps you might not know has to do with the cyanotypes. So there's various different modes of drawing that I'm working with. Some of it is stitching, some of it's actual drawing, and some of it is cyanotype, which is a photographic process. I think there's a few more.
Yes. Fascinating. It really brings the work alive when you can talk about what your influences are and how you got to this imagery and some of the porcelain. I feel like I'm watching a version of Antiques Roadshow, because some of these porcelain houses we don't hear about unless you watch that. So it's fascinating how you in the backs of things and work that into the rest of your work.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm interested in history also because as we stand in different places, we don't necessarily know, like the present is the past, you know. This is just an image of my studio here in San Pedro, and just to show you really how I work on things. I love this studio. It's on like a north-south axis, so the light actually travels from the front to the back of the space throughout the day. And this is a piece that I'm in the midst of working on. It's not completed. It's for a show that's at Descanso Gardens. It's a group show called Castle Garden, and it involves other artists that are also working with some of this material of translation of imagery and how it passes through various different cultures. And then
How did you happen to come to San Pedro in the first place?
Oh, I actually moved here from Lower Manhattan, and I moved here technically because of the job at Cal State Long Beach, but also because I really loved this area. And actually, before I came here, it was a post 9/11 move, and I was having a lot of dreams about a particular place. And as it turns out, it was San Pedro. So, but that was 17 or 18 years ago. So that's,
wow.
I've been here a while. And this is a project I'm working on for the Long Beach Museum of Art, and it's a kind of, what do I want to say, a topography of patterns and their intersection. It's really just started, but it's you know, almost like an aerial view of sorts, and it's going to splay out into the space. So it's again something that's also being reconfigured as I work on it and so on. And I think, oh, the last image actually is just let's see, Riley. Oh, I was going to say, yeah, so this is what I'm currently working on. And, you know, we've all been dealing with what to do during COVID, right? Projects that were stalled, or, you know, in my case, I had an exhibition up and I really was planning on taking a trip and doing another fellowship. And so now I usually have some downtime where I'm actually absorbing something else. But now during this downtime, I'm actually here. So I've been working on a drawing a day, and I've been trying to see if there's a connection between weaving and COVID. But the idea of how something begins as a kind of nucleus and expands outwards, and what that could be like in terms of a basket or a virus. So
I also think that this is, you know, this pause that we've taken is a
yeah.
particular opportunity to reset ourselves. And so, what brings you joy these days? I know it's really tough when we're also isolated from each other, beyond your work, because this is awfully wonderful.
Survival brings me joy, and also walking, drawing, yoga, different things that are just you know, kind of getting by. I've also been reading a lot, and using these audiobooks on LA Public Library that are part of a kind of Black Lives Matter reading list. Because I'm not out protesting, I think that it's really important to do something else. And for me, that's like an internal like greater understanding. And I'm also studying Portuguese, so that if I need to make a quick getaway out of the country, there might be another
Exit
option.
stage that's left.
So, yeah.
Yeah, my pandemic book to going into this was Gone with the Wind, and I was reading it with particular irony.
Yeah.
That haven't really changed. And then I switched to Wolf Hall, which is about a plague in the background there as well. Well, I really, did you talk about everything that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it's lovely meeting you. I want to meet you in person.
Yeah, I would just say the only other thing that I would add is that I think, you know, San Pedro is such an interesting place, and there's a lot here that a lot of us, you know, come here and we kind of work here, and not everybody knows what's going on behind doors, and in a way that can be wonderful. There is an artist community, and it's not always out front. So I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's I really worry about, you know, things like gentrification, and you know, I know that for a minute that San Pedro is the next it place, and people are moving here. But you're right, a lot of us, you know, pardon my ignorance, but you are just an amazing artist, and I had no idea who you were until Laurie introduced us.
Yeah.
So that's so awesome. I hope to meet you in person one day.
Yeah. Oh, and maybe the last thing I want to say is that I'm working on a project for LA Metro, which is the Wilshire La Brea station, and I'm one of 3 artists that are doing permanent works for that, and I'm super excited about that. So
that's
yeah.
so great. So Ray put up your website. Sorry.
Yeah. No, just I said hopefully people will be able to take the Metro at some point. So yeah.
Well, that's great. And so hopefully we'll be able to keep in touch somehow to see how your work is progressing, and when we are allowed to gather in person, ways that we can come and see the work, because I think it has even more impact, of course, when you see it in person.
I hope so.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to Laurie Steelink in Cornelius Projects and Scott Aker How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Well, good.
Good.
So as I mentioned, this gathering of South Pacific artists was Laurie's idea. And Laurie has a storied history in being a gallerist. She started at Track 16. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Fran. What prompted you to come to San Pedro?
Well, the space actually that I'm in right now. It was offered to me at a time where I felt I needed a change. And even though I was working in, at the time, Santa Monica, and then moving to Culver City, where Track 16 made their first move from Bergamot Station, I thought, well, this is a great opportunity and I really can't turn it down. And it's an amazing situation that I have here. And how I ended up finding, in a sense, Cornelius project within the space, it was like a no-brainer. There was enough space for me to have my studio and to be able to live, and then have a space where I could exhibit local artists and organize exhibitions that focused on the harbor area. And this was a way for me to educate myself about San Pedro and the history of San Pedro, the culture of San Pedro. I only knew a few people when I moved down here. I knew that it had a very vibrant music scene. I wasn't so much aware of the art scene, although I had come for a couple First Thursday art walks. But when I moved down here, I just, needed to, in a sense, find my place and to open up to the community so that I could be educated by the community. And in some ways, the community could be educated by me taking in art by other local artists and music themes and car culture themes, makers themes, all these things that were of interest to me and a great way to learn about what was here. I used to visit San Pedro and bring my dog to the dog beach, the unofficial dog beach that in Pacific Palisades, and I always loved it. And the first night I spent in this space, my car was totaled outside as it was parked on the street. And I was told by other San Pedrans that that was the San Pedro handshake and welcome to San Pedro. And that car was a nice car. It was a Honda Civic or a CRV. And what I did was I got a Prius, so the mileage was much less and the gas was economical. So that all worked out.
When you arrived here and I got to see the gallery, there were 3 spaces there, right? Or am I not remembering correctly?
There's, in this building, there's 2 separate live work spaces with a wall. The wall that's behind us runs the complete length of the building. And my neighbor, Sheridan Laurie, her parents actually bought this building and gutted it and then turned it into their own live work spaces. It was a man and a wife, and they built a wall down the middle and had a little doorway in between where they could go in and out of each other's space. But it was the perfect way to live, I think, for long-lasting marriage. And they're still around, but they're living in Mexico now.
Yeah, my husband said, could you buy the house next door and we don't have to live together?
Right.
So I'm going to ask you to introduce Scott and then show us what you've done here. I see the exhibit has moved to the walls.
Yes. So I'm just going to say out of courtesy here, this to my right, or whatever left, however anybody's looking at, this is Scott Aker. And he is a local legend and favorite and a much loved persona here. And I have always wanted to do an exhibition with him, and I'm so happy to have done it now.
Well, I'm glad to be showing here. It's something that we talked about I would go to a lot of Laurie's shows that she had already, and a bunch of my friends have shown here, and I have always wanted to. I missed the Joe Biza show. He's one of my favorite artists, and I missed his whole show, and it was phenomenal, and I should have been there. But I did go to a few other shows here, and we got to know each other through seeing each other at band shows and things like that. And we've always talked about putting something together. And then I wound up showing with other galleries over the years, and I accumulated a lot of work, a big body of work. And I told her, I said, you know, I've never actually really properly done a full show of everything. And she just kept saying, and bring me more work. So I would fill up my car and then bring it down, and she'd go, well, we need more than that. And so we kept bringing more and more work in. And so she's got basically everything that was in my studio is here now. So
that's awesome. What's your background? Have you always been a working artist?
Yeah, for the most part. Like I said, my parents were insurance salesmen, so I didn't want to do that. And I've always drawn since I was a kid. It's always been my my therapy in a way that I've always kind of relied on for everything. For when I was bored when I was a kid, I was always entertained by drawing or building Legos or something like that. So it was always I was about, you know, half the time I'd spend with my friends, and the other half I would spend creating things. And I always wanted to really draw album covers. The album covers that I saw on for rock bands, like Rick Griffin was a 60s psychedelic artist that I was really into. And I wasn't so much into the Grateful Dead, but he did a lot of album covers for them. And that's really what got me into the idea of maybe one day designing album covers. And I worked for surfwear companies over the years, and I worked for bigger entertainment companies that did things for amusement parks and things like that. We had a lot of licenses for different companies, and I mostly did inking by hand. And now it's mostly done on computer now, but that was my specialty, where I'm really good at line work and inking, because before I did any painting, I was mostly just designing flyers for punk rock bands, which were always black and white most of the time. And I worked at print shops, so I could make the flyers for the bands. And I met the bands at a record store that I worked at on the weekends. So I had 2 jobs going. And eventually my friends told me about San Pedro. And I grew up mostly in Redondo Beach, and it was about that time for me to move out. And my friend said, you know, there's an apartment in San Pedro, and it's pretty cheap. So I've been here ever since.
That's awesome. So do you want to show us what you've got up on the walls? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and he, just speaking about his ability to draw, and he's a very confident drafts person and painter. But what you asked about the exhibition, you know, paintings were hung on the wall without actually Scott, because we hit the time where we're supposed to be staying at home by ourselves or with our families. And I hung the show so that he could paint on the wall. So what has happened as the restrictions have sort of loosened and we've become familiar with each other, and this is probably the closest we've been to each other in a while, but we've been safe for the most part. And he has done work on the walls, and it's great, and it's impressive to see him work with such ease, because for me, if I were given that opportunity, you know, I'd have to really do a lot of planning, and I'd want to do it by myself so nobody was watching me.
well, I do plan it, but I think of like several ideas in my mind before I come over here, and then I usually go with the most spontaneous one, like whatever I'm thinking at the time. at one point I was working on animation, so I decided to do a little sequence of animations painted on the wall and then animate it when I went home later after I took the picture. So I made a little animation with it, and whatever, it's about having fun. It's really about, it's whatever's the most fun, and that's the main thing for me is it's always been my escape, and it's always been something that's free, basically, you know, that.
I think too that you have that, like with Fran and a lot of the art, most of the artists we talked to, both of you included, is that you have to do this.
Yeah.
Your DNA, it has to come out somehow.
Yeah.
So show us what you've done.
So Riley has some images from the, well, that I sent her, that started with the video that we made before the work was actually painted on the walls, which is playing now.
Yes, it is.
And you can see the exhibition without painting, so on the walls.
So this was obviously one of my rock star things. I'm a big Kiss fan, so.
It looks like it.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of theirs since I was a kid, and it's one of those things that I know it's wrong to be a Kiss fan in the punk rock thing, but I'm still a fan of theirs. So
The heart ones with the heart ones.
And these are more during tougher times when I was doing the kind of death theme images. And then I got these bright ones over here. And this one in particular, the spaceship was, I did after one of our dogs passed away. And it's basically a spaceship made up of, piloted by spirits of animals, collecting spirits of other animals that are going on to their next destination. So that was the
Really fanciful
behind that. And that was just a fun spaceship.
Yeah, and the show, even with the painting on the wall, has changed too, because some of the paintings actually left, which was really great because I had a few visitors come in who wanted work and who were giving it as gifts, and were able to take it off the wall because I still had a reserve of some of the work that Scott brought. So some of the work has changed out a little bit, and I just also, as this is playing, want to encourage, I think it maybe got stuck here, encourage people to make appointments to come see the show, wearing masks, of course, and keeping 6 feet social distance. But I am open to having people come and see the show. And it's, you know, having the show right now at this time is really been a very good thing to have because of the brightness of the work. Even though there's underlying themes that are dark, there's still this quality of light and playfulness. And I really have been responding to that, you know, and embracing that because of the situation that we're finding ourselves in with the pandemic. And there's something very, you know, like I said, there's darker tones, undertones, but there's something very light about it. And it's also humorous as well. So it's been a really good show, and I'm going to continue to keep it up for as long as possible. Like I said to Scott, it would be nice to keep it up until people could gather, but I don't know how soon that is going to be.
Yeah, who knows how long that's going to take. And then for those of you watching on Facebook Live, if you use the Google and go to Cornelius projects, that's how you reach Laurie and can make an appointment.
Yeah. So this is, I think after this, we'll go to a couple slides of the paintings on the wall. And I don't think I included everyone so that it gives somebody a surprise when they actually come to see the show. But we made this video kind of as a teaser, but also there is a narrative. And I'm always happy to tell people about that narrative when they come to see the show. And I did that with without Scott. And it was really fun to, when he came in, to tell him all about my ideas and why I grouped these things together and why they went from one grouping to the next grouping. And then with the wall painting, he kind of made some connections and then kind of opened it up to a degree where I hadn't necessarily thought of, and I didn't mind at all. So
yeah, and I think that's some of your gifts as a true gallerist, is that it's one thing when it's in the studio, but then when you take it out into the public and you're telling that story, it takes somebody like you to bring that alive, because the artist obviously has been seeing this a lot. So
right,
you are very gifted, and you do bring together things that are like, whoa, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
I would really encourage people to see it in person, because I put a lot of detail in the work that you can't really see through the video. But I do put a lot of detail in, because I've worked really long hours on getting it the way I want it to be, and I make it as fun for me too. You know, I'm really. I want people that when they see it to take that away with them, like a sense of fun. You know, I want it to be fun for the viewer.
Yeah, and even though, you know, nudity is not a bad thing, so kids really enjoy this show as well. I'm just thinking about those images that we landed on. And Riley, I don't know if you have those images that have I think you do have the images with the painting on the wall. You could show those next if you can get to them, because it's a real treat. Yeah, so okay, you can see that that's what's also behind us, but this was the most amazing when you came. This was the first piece that he did on the wall.
Yeah, well, my wife's a teacher, so I wanted to have something with teachers involved in it, because a lot of artists like myself, I'm basically, I'd like to say I was self-taught, but you know, if you really want to pursue a career in art, you're going to have to take classes and learn. So I mean, teaching, you learn from your mistakes.
And
so.
Yeah, and your friends talking about work. Yeah.
So it's really teachers are really important, and teachers have always, and like I say, my wife's a teacher, and she's taught me. I mean, the majority of all this is just like, sometimes it's just to make her laugh, you know, and that kind of thing. So.
Well, we need a good laugh every now and again.
Yeah.
Still images to show us?
Yeah, you can just keep going. Yeah, there's a little bit of the animation details at the bottom.
Yeah.
A little paint tube.
Those were the little animated guys that I illustrated, a skateboarder paint.
Yeah, these look good.
This is great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this is so much fun. There's so much joy here.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to have this.
Yeah.
I really want people to see it. Yeah. Is there one more? Yeah, and that's, I don't know if you want to say anything to that.
Well, I mean, this is, I don't want to go too far into what the meanings are behind all this stuff, but it's basically when I was feeling like out of control, like things were out of my control, and I was feeling, and these kind of, I don't know if Laurie put them all together. And to me, when she did that, I realized that when I was painting those is when I was feeling like I was needing to find reason for things that didn't make any sense to me.
And then you got the COVID.
Yeah, and there's COVID there too.
Yeah,
I put a little COVID in there with the times that we're going through, because this was all kind of done. Probably a lot of those paintings were done probably in the last couple of years when we were going through what led up to this time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Without the politics. Well, this is really wonderful, and I thank you so much for doing this. It was great to meet you, and I hope to see this in person one of these days.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the mourners in the Sardine, I just wanted to um, say a few words about a lovely woman, Pat Carroll, that passed away about 10 days ago on her 81st birthday. And if those of you who are watching that are in a position to donate, we have a program that's up until the middle of July called Pay It Forward. And for every $50 that you donate to the Arts District, we will give you a $25 gift certificate for a participating business. So we really sad about losing Pat. This is the whole reason that we started this when we went into quarantine, because Pat was the one for 10 years that did live docent-led art walk tours for the first hour of the regular art walk. Our art walk is going to be 23 years old in November. So I'm still really raw about losing a friend, and it does give me a lot of joy to be able to see you and promote amazing artists in San Pedro. So I'm gonna move on to the Sardine, and and ask Todd to come on camera. Todd is the owner of the Sardine. Can you unmute yourself?
Do that.
Go. Are you there? Oh, there you are.
Hi,
Oh,
how's it going?
thank you for joining us. It's nice to see you in person other than on my phone. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about yourself and the swamp and the Sardine. I'm going to get that right.
Are you saying the swarm?
I said the swamp. I'm sorry.
Okay, because my daughter got stung by a swarm of bees today, so I thought it was the swarm. I'm like,
Didn't she just have a birthday too? A couple weeks ago?
no, that was my stuff.
Okay.
So, anyways, the Sardine. Me and my partner Isaac started this because we were doing shows at our old warehouse, and they were illegal shows, so we wanted to be legal, and we thought San Pedro needed a place for not just local bands but touring bands, because a lot of touring bands want to play San Pedro. There's a mythical thing about it, and we just never had we always piecemealed shows together, like at Harold's and houses, and we just wanted a solid place.
So you're in what was Ramona's Bakery, right?
Yes.
Half of that or the whole thing?
The whole thing that was Ramona's, what basically was the storeroom where you actually went and bought donuts and coffee and cakes. That's the bar area, and then the back room where they baked is the show area, which we're in right now. So we built this for the bands to play on, and it's a perfect building for what we want to do, because it kind of separates, like if somebody just wants to hang out and drink a beer or wine or coffee.
And it's really exciting to have another performance space in Pedro too. I'm so sorry that you opened it like a month before we went into quarantine.
Well,
and open again, right?
That's how we planned it,
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
We have a good business sense.
Yeah. Bad luck and trouble,
We read the forecast newspapers a lot. Perfect timing. Yeah, it's been very trying. It took us 3 years to build the place and then 3 months to shut it down, and that's how it goes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I want to introduce the mourners. It's 3 musicians: Ralph Gordetsky, Moni Olgin, and Candace Gahn. Candace is here in the middle here. And I'm going to start with Moni. And Moni is also a visual artist, and she sent Riley an image that she wanted to share. Riley, can you find that? This one.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk about a little bit about that, Moni?
Yeah. Let me see if we're a little bit there. Okay. I lost my studio a couple years ago, so I do everything at home. And so I use watercolor and pencil, colored pencil, watercolor pencil, and acrylics. So it's very portable, and so I can take it with me if I go someplace, and I can work at home on these pictures. But you know, I do a lot of very personal things, dreams and images and visions that I have. And this one particularly, I was thinking about colorism that that we experience, we people of color experience.
Yeah.
And I saw this image of this little dark girl, and she was so beautiful, a baby. And it just really captured me. And she has a bonnet on, and I just loved it. And then I have a friend who's a singer, and who sings at Barbara Morrison's place where I sing too in Leimert Park. And she's very androgynous, and she's very, very light. And I thought putting those both images together was a beautiful juxtaposition, and spoke to me about the way people view, you know, that both colors are beautiful, and the spectrum of the colors of people are beautiful, because people of color do experience discrimination in their own mind about what color they are, you know, and so that's what this picture is about.
This is lovely, and I should mention that Moni is the daughter of a San Pedro artist, Muriel Olguin, who had a studio in the 4th Street Loft for a long time and was quite prolific. So thank you for doing this. I'm going to move on to Candace. We have an image that Candace painted. How you doing, my girl? Did you want to talk about this image?
Oh, yeah. Well, I moved to San Pedro about 30 years ago. I had met Moni's mother, Muriel Olguin, in the Women's Caucus for Art in LA, where we go have all our meetings. And I was in Redondo, and I didn't really know too many other artists there. So about 30 years ago, my husband and I, moved to San Pedro because we wanted a town that was diverse, interesting. There's people here of all varieties. And I thought, yeah, this is my town. They're from all over the world, rich, poor, and there's a lot of artists here. That's what I like. And so,
oh, you landed in artist nirvana.
Yeah, now all the artists are moving in. They discovered it. It's beautiful here. It's interesting. It's industrial. It's got the trains, boats, planes, and the ocean. This is actually this painting is downtown San Pedro. The things I paint are things that I see in my life. This is off of Center Street, an alley between 6th and 7th Street. And I saw this image one night, and it really spoke to me. Often paint solitary figures where they don't know I'm there. And it just had a haunting feeling of the oldness of our town. And there's a lot of poverty here, and there's a lot of loneliness. And yeah, and there's a lot of affluence and artists. It's just this crazy mixed up place that's so interesting. And when I moved here, I got to become part of the neighborhood, there's a real community feeling here, and that's what I like. And
this technique is acoustic. Am I pronouncing that right? Painting?
Yes, it's
acoustic. This is not your first foray with light, as it were.
No. I've been showing for about 45 years. I was lucky. I started, drawing the body early. I loved drawing, and then someone said try painting, so I did. I've been showing for about 45 years all over the world, really. And but people here, and I showed in LA and all around, but I was kind of a solitary person, and so people here, until I started doing neon, which I've done for about 35 years, people didn't know I was a painter. And my husband and I were singing over at the Red Man's Lodge on Shepherd Street, and I didn't know Laurie Steelink was there. And Laurie invited me to sing with her band, which was Ralph Gordetzky. And so I started singing with him. And then I got to know Laurie, who I just adore. And she's very steeped, a very cultured person. It was really nice as an artist to speak with her about art. And all the
And
issues.
Laurie was a mourner at one point too.
And Laurie was a mourner. So we started seeing each other on a regular basis, practicing and stuff. And then we were playing on 6th Street. And then I ran into Monique, Muriel's daughter, and she had a studio. She had a studio near mine on the loft. And anyway, she said, I want to sing with you. And darn her, she didn't start singing with us. And she's a great singer. And
And there we are. So if you want to see some of Candace's neon work, you might go by the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium. There's a piece of hers that was just recently restored and put in the window of the gift shop. And so it is gorgeous. And so thank you for doing that. I'm just going to move on to Ralph and introduce himself. And then you're going to play 2 songs and then come back to me.
I feel like I'm going into the hot seat here. Hi.
Hi, Ralph. Ralph is a musician and you teach Tai Chi?
Yeah, yoga and Tai Chi. I mean, it's interesting, like, I knew Laurie from that before we were doing this. You know, I mean, those lines all kind of cross. Like you had mentioned Pat. I mean, I got kind of a little teary when I saw her picture because she's been a student of mine for like 15 years, you know. So, I mean, basically, I just been teaching like down here yoga and Tai Chi and stuff. And then all those lines kind of overcross each other. Do you know what I mean? Like different cultural lines about music or all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
What are you going to play for us tonight?
First song we're going to do is called Pandemonium, which was written halfway through the pandemic before the uprising.
Okay.
I would say halfway through the pandemic, but we don't know when halfway through the pandemic is. So.
Right, exactly. The 2 songs that you prepared, then come back to me so I can thank everybody and
sure. Thank you very much.
Can play us out. Thank you.
Laurie and New Life is a punk rock suite, which is little punk rock songs for those with a short attention span. They one writing them. Ready? Everything. Happy, happy, I'm so happy. I'm so glad, I'm so fucking happy. Society sucks and I just said my God. What could be much better than that? Happy, 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 I'm so happy. I'm so glad, I'm so fucking happy. Society sucks and I just said my God. What could be much better than that? I'm happy now. Don't wanna be, I'm gonna see, really sing. How does that make me unhappy? Don't wanna be, I'm gonna see, really sing. How does that make me unhappy? Don't wanna be, I'm gonna see, really sing. How does that make me unhappy? Don't wanna be, I'm gonna see. Happy, no submission. But I won't submit, 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 I just won't submit, don't submit, no, I won't submit. No motherfucker, no motherfucker, no motherfucker, no! No motherfucker, no motherfucker, no motherfucker, no! No won't submit, 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 no won't submit. No motherfucker, no motherfucker, no motherfucker, no! No motherfucker, no motherfucker, no motherfucker, no! Any of my students out there, my yoga students, pretend like you didn't hear the lyrics on that one.
I can't wait to come and see you live, to be there with you in person. I'm so happy too that you're here. So I want to thank you all for being here, and I thank Candace, Moni, Ralph, Fran, Laurie, Scott, Riley. I could not live without Riley, and Ray for helping out. And you have one more song to play us out. And thank you again for being here. We're going to do this again next month. We'll be featuring artists that have something to do with Charles Bukowski, because as some of you know, August 16th, he would have been 100 years old. So we're gonna use the August Armchair to celebrate that. So thank you, and the mourners are gonna play us out. Thank you, Riley.
Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Don't do it, 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 don't do it. Fucking aggravation, fucking aggravation, fucking aggravation, fucking aggravation, fucking aggravation, fucking aggravation, fucking don't do it, fucking
Lost in the power you imagine you may have. Only someone so small would try to act so big. Lost in the power you imagine you may have. Only someone so small would try to act so big. Lost in the power you imagine you may have. Only someone so small would try to act so big. Lost in the power you imagine you may have. Only someone so small would try to act so big. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.